The medical bay of the Zephyrian transport vessel hummed with alien technology, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft blue light. Ambassador Kithara stood before the containment unit, her forearms crossed in a gesture of frustration that transcended species barriers. Inside the transparent chamber lay a creature that had once been the apex predator of 3 star systems. The Vorthak was dying. Its massive form, easily the size of an earth tiger, but with the sleek grace of a panther, lay motionless except for the labored rise and fall of its chest. Bioluminescent stripes along its midnight black fur flickered weakly, like dying stars against the void of space. 6 legs, each ending in retractable claws that could slice through starship hull plating, twitched occasionally in fevered dreams. The neural degradation has accelerated beyond our projections, Dr. Yilneth reported, his insectoid features clicking with distress. The parasitic infection has spread throughout 70% of its brain tissue. Our best estimate gives it perhaps 6 rotations before complete neural collapse. Kethara's secondary arms gestured sharply, a sign of deep agitation among her people. This is unacceptable. The Vorthak is not merely a predator. It is a living symbol of our homeworld's strength. When the Hegemon Council learns that we have failed to preserve even one specimen, with respect, Ambassador, Dr. Yilneth interrupted, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light. We have exhausted every treatment protocol in our medical databases. The parasite is unlike anything we have encountered. It specifically targets neural pathways associated with predatory instincts and survival responses. It is almost as if it was designed to destroy creatures like the Vorthak. The irony was not lost on Kethara. The Zephyrian collective had conquered 17 worlds through their mastery of biological warfare. They had created plagues that could wipe out entire ecosystems and parasites that could turn a species' own immune system against itself. Yet now they found themselves helpless against a microscopic enemy that had somehow infiltrated their most prized specimen. The Vorthak had been captured from the quarantined world of Nethys Prime, the last known habitat of its species. The planet had been rendered uninhabitable by a cosmic radiation storm, forcing the collective to evacuate the few remaining Vorthak specimens for preservation. This particular individual, designated Specimen Alpha 7, had been the strongest and most aggressive of the survivors. Now it lay dying in their care, and with it died their hopes of breeding a new generation of these magnificent predators. Sir, Communications Officer Vextal announced from across the medical bay, we are receiving a priority transmission from Earth Station Beta. The human delegation is requesting permission to dock. Kethara's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The humans. Of all the species they could have encountered during this crisis, it had to be the humans. The collective had been aware of humanity for only 3 standard cycles, but their reputation had already spread throughout this sector of the galaxy. They were an oddity among spacefaring civilizations, a species that seemed to form emotional attachments to other life forms for no apparent evolutionary advantage. What do they want? Kethara demanded. They claim to have a specialist in xenobiological neural disorders, Vextal replied, his tone suggesting he found the claim as dubious as his superior, a young female who has apparently studied parasitic infections in Earth's predatory mammals. Dr. Yilneth's antennae twitched with what might have been amusement. A human child thinks she can succeed where our finest bioengineers have failed? The arrogance of that species never ceases to amaze me. But Kethara was quiet, her 4 eyes focused on the dying Vorthak. In their 3 cycles of contact with humanity, the collective had learned to expect the unexpected from these strange bipeds. They possessed no natural weapons, no enhanced senses, no particular physical advantages over most spacefaring species. Yet they had somehow carved out a place for themselves in galactic society through sheer determination and an inexplicable ability to find solutions where others saw only problems. What do we have to lose? She asked finally. If our own methods have failed, perhaps a fresh perspective might reveal something we have overlooked. Dr. Yilneth's compound eyes focused on her with obvious disapproval. Ambassador, with respect, allowing an alien, especially a human, access to classified biological data could compromise. The data will be worthless if the specimen dies. Kethara cut him off. And if the humans have even the slightest chance of saving the Vorthak, then we must take that chance. Grant them docking permission. As Vextal transmitted the authorization, Kethara moved closer to the containment unit, The Vorthak's massive head turned slightly at her approach, and for a moment, one golden eye opened to regard her with dim intelligence. Even in its weakened state, there was something magnificent about the creature, a primal power that spoke to older, deeper parts of the psyche. The Vorthak had once ruled the twilight forests of Nethys Prime, moving through the canopy like liquid shadow. They were solitary hunters, territorial and fiercely independent, yet they possessed an intelligence that bordered on sapience, capable of complex problem-solving and even rudimentary tool use. Some xenobiologists theorized that given a few more million years of evolution, the Vorthak might have developed their own civilization. Now they faced extinction, and the last hope for their survival rested in the hands of an unknown human. The docking alert chimed through the medical bay, indicating that the human vessel had successfully connected to their ship. Cathara straightened her robes and checked her translation matrix. First contact protocols demanded formal courtesy, even in circumstances as unusual as these. Dr. Yilneth, prepare a full briefing on our treatment attempts, she ordered. Include all diagnostic data and biological scans. If this human specialist is genuine, she will need access to everything we have learned. And if she is not genuine? Dr. Yilneth asked. Cathara looked once more at the dying Vorthak, its bioluminescent stripes now barely visible against its dark fur. Then we will have lost nothing more than we are already losing. But if there is even the smallest possibility that these humans can help us— She left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. The Zephyrian collective had built their reputation on biological mastery, yet they now faced a problem that defied all their knowledge and expertise. Perhaps it was time to admit that even they had limitations. The airlock cycled and footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond. Human footsteps, light and quick, approaching with purpose. Cathara steeled herself for whatever was to come, knowing that the next few rotations would determine not just the fate of one dying predator, but possibly the future of an entire species. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped through the airlock of the Zephyrian vessel, her worn duffel bag slung over one shoulder, and a portable diagnostic kit clutched in her other hand. At 24, she looked even younger than her years, especially when surrounded by the towering alien architecture of the ship's corridors. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her Earth-standard medical uniform seemed almost primitive compared to the flowing, bioluminescent robes of her Zephyrian escorts. But her eyes held a determination that made even the four-armed ambassador Cathara pause in her assessment of this unlikely specialist. Dr. Chen, Cathara began, her translation matrix converting her words into English. I must admit, your credentials are unconventional. Your formal education consists of a veterinary degree from a minor Earth institution, with a specialization in feline neurological disorders. Sarah nodded calmly, seemingly unbothered by the obvious skepticism in the ambassador's tone. That's correct. I also spent 2 years working with the Big Cat Rehabilitation Center in Kenya, treating everything from lions with parasitic brain infections to jaguars suffering from toxoplasmosis-related neurological damage. Dr. Yilneth's antennae twitched dismissively. Earth felines are hardly comparable to a Vorthak, young human. The neurological complexity alone is probably not as different as you think, Sarah interrupted, causing both aliens to step back in surprise. Few beings interrupted a Zephyrian scientist, and certainly not humans barely out of their academic phase. I've studied your preliminary reports on Vorthak biology. The neural pathway structures show remarkable similarities to Earth's large predatory cats, particularly in the regions governing hunting instincts and territorial behavior. She paused, looking between the two aliens with steady confidence. More importantly, the parasitic infection you're dealing with? I've seen something very similar in African lions. Different parasite, same mechanism of action, and I know how to treat it. Cathara exchanged a glance with Dr. Yilneth, their silent communication lasting several seconds. Finally, the ambassador gestured toward the medical bay. Very well, Dr. Chen. You may examine the specimen. But I must warn you, time is extremely limited. Our projections indicate complete neural collapse within 6 rotations. About 18 Earth hours, Sarah calculated quickly. That should be enough time if my theory is correct. They walked through corridors that seemed to pulse with organic life, the walls themselves breathing with a rhythm that felt almost alive. Sarah tried not to gawk at the alien technology surrounding her, but she couldn't help marveling at the seamless integration of biology and machinery that characterized Zephyrian design. "Tell me about the containment protocols," she asked as they walked. "How long has the specimen been in isolation?" 47 rotations, Dr. Yilnith replied. "We have maintained strict quarantine procedures to prevent the spread of the parasitic infection. The creature has been fed intravenously to avoid any potential contamination of our food systems." Sarah stopped walking so abruptly that Ambassador Cathera nearly collided with her. 47 days without normal food? Without the ability to exhibit natural behaviors? The containment was necessary for... Dr. Yilnith began. "You're killing it," Sarah said flatly. "Not the parasite, you. Predatory cats, especially highly intelligent ones like your Vorthak, require mental stimulation and the expression of natural behaviors for neurological health. 47 days of complete isolation and artificial feeding would be enough to cause neural degradation in any Earth feline, infection or no infection." The alien's silence stretched uncomfortably as they absorbed this information. Finally, Cathara spoke, her voice carefully controlled. "Are you suggesting that our treatment protocols have been counterproductive?" "I'm suggesting that you might be fighting two different problems instead of one," Sarah replied, resuming her walk toward the medical bay. "The parasitic infection is certainly real and dangerous, but the isolation and artificial feeding have created a secondary condition that's making the creature more vulnerable to the parasite's effects." They entered the medical bay, and Sarah got her first glimpse of the Vorthak. Her breath caught in her throat. Even in its weakened state, the creature was magnificent. Its size alone was impressive, easily 3 times larger than any Earth cat, but it was the obvious intelligence in its golden eyes that truly struck her. "Beautiful," she whispered, approaching the containment unit slowly. "Absolutely beautiful." The Vorthak's head turned at her approach, and for a moment their eyes met through the transparent barrier. Sarah felt a shock of recognition, as if some primal part of her mind recognized a kindred predator spirit in the alien creature. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Yilnith called from behind her, "I must insist you maintain a safe distance. The Vorthak's claws can penetrate most known materials, and even in its weakened state." "It's not going to hurt me," Sarah said with quiet certainty. She placed her palm against the containment barrier, and incredibly, the Vorthak shifted position to mirror her gesture, its massive paw pressing against the barrier from the other side. Cathara's forearms crossed in agitation. "How can you possibly know that?" Sarah smiled for the first time since boarding the ship. "Because it recognizes what I am. Cats, whether they're house cats or 100-kilogram predators, have an instinct for identifying those who understand them. This one knows I'm here to help." She opened her diagnostic kit and began assembling a neural scanner designed for large mammals. "I need to perform a detailed brain scan, but not through the containment barrier. The interference will disrupt the readings." "Absolutely not," Dr. Yilnith protested. "The risk of infection. I've been exposed to similar parasites before," Sarah said calmly. "African lions carry a variant that affects humans in minimal ways. My immune system has already developed partial resistance. More importantly, I can't treat what I can't properly diagnose." She looked directly at Ambassador Cathara. "Your choice, Ambassador. Let me do my job properly, or watch your specimen die according to schedule." The ambassador was quiet for several long moments, studying the young human who stood so confidently before them. There was something in Sarah's demeanor that reminded Cathara of the Vorthak itself, a calm, predatory confidence that suggested hidden depths beneath an unassuming exterior. "Dr. Yilnith, disable the containment field," she ordered finally. "Ambassador, I must protest, the decision is made." Cathara's tone brooked no argument. "Prepare emergency containment procedures, but give Dr. Chen access to the specimen." The containment field shimmered and disappeared, leaving only empty air between Sarah and the most dangerous predator in 3 star systems. The Vorthak raised its massive head, golden eyes fixed on the small human who approached without fear. Sarah knelt beside the creature, her movements slow and deliberate. "Hello, beautiful," she whispered, extending her hand toward the Vorthak's muzzle. "Let's see what we can do about making you feel better." The Vorthak's response sent shockwaves through both Zephyrian observers. The massive predator, weakened by infection and isolation, lowered its great head and allowed the human to touch its fur. A low rumbling sound filled the medical bay, not quite a purr, but something unmistakably similar. For the first time in 47 rotations, the Vorthak's bioluminescent stripes flickered with something approaching their normal brightness. Impossible, Dr. Yilnith breathed. But Sarah was already running her scanners over the creature's skull, her practiced hands moving with the confidence of someone who had performed this procedure hundreds of times. Not impossible, she murmured. Just unexpected. Sometimes the solution isn't about superior technology or advanced knowledge. Sometimes it's about understanding what a creature needs to heal. Sarah's scanner hummed softly as it mapped the Vorthak's neural pathways. The device's Earth-designed technology somehow interfacing seamlessly with the alien brain structure. The creature remained remarkably still during the examination, its golden eyes never leaving Sarah's face, as if it understood that this small human represented its only hope for survival. The parasite concentration is highest in the hippocampus equivalent, Sarah murmured, studying the readouts on her portable display. That explains the memory loss and disorientation. But look at these patterns in the motor cortex. She paused, her brow furrowing as she processed the data. The neural degradation wasn't random. It followed specific pathways that seemed almost too precise to be natural. Dr. Yilnith moved closer, his compound eyes reflecting the scanner's blue light as he attempted to interpret the human device's readings. I cannot comprehend these symbols, he admitted reluctantly. Your scanning technology uses completely different parameters than our own. Sarah glanced up from her scanner, then at the towering Zephyrian scientist. That's actually helpful. Sometimes a fresh perspective reveals things that advanced analysis might miss. She stood, moving to the medical bay's central console. May I access your biological database? I need to compare the parasitic structure with similar organisms from your records. Ambassador Kethara gestured her consent, though her posture remained tense. Dr. Yilnith, provide Dr. Chen with Level 7 access to our xenobiological archives, but monitor all data transfers. The next hour passed in intense study, as Sarah cross-referenced her scan results with the Zephyrian medical database. The aliens watched in fascination as the young human worked, her fingers dancing across interfaces designed for beings with 4 arms, somehow managing to navigate their complex systems with surprising efficiency. Your scientists were right about one thing, Sarah said finally, her voice cutting through the medical bay's ambient hum. This parasite is definitely artificial. The genetic markers are too clean, too targeted. But they were wrong about its origin. Dr. Yilnith's antennae twitched with interest. Explain. Sarah turned her scanner's display toward the aliens, highlighting specific data points. The parasite isn't designed to kill the Vorthak. It's designed to control them. The silence that followed was profound. Kethara's forearms moved in rapid, agitated gestures, a sign of extreme distress among her people. Impossible. The Vorthak are apex predators. They cannot be domesticated or controlled by any known means. Not domesticated, Sarah corrected. Weaponized. Look at the neural pathway targeting. The parasite isn't destroying the Vorthak's hunting instincts, it's redirecting them, removing fear responses, inhibiting pack bond formation, eliminating territorial recognition, except for specific pheromone markers. She pulled up a 3-dimensional model of the Vorthak's brain, highlighting the affected regions in red. Someone was trying to create the perfect biological weapon, a creature with all the physical capabilities of a Vorthak, but with enhanced aggression and no fear response. The neural degradation you're seeing isn't a side effect. It's the result of the host's mind fighting against the artificial modifications. Dr. Yilnith studied the data with growing alarm. If your analysis is correct, then the infection on Nethys Prime was not natural. It was an act of biological warfare. Against your own species, Sarah added grimly. The pheromone markers encoded in the parasite. They're Zephyrian. Someone wanted to create Vorthak that would see your people as their territorial pack leaders, while viewing everyone else as prey. The implications hit both aliens simultaneously. Kethara's secondary arms began trembling, a reaction Sarah had never seen from a Zephyrian before. The Hegemon Council must be informed immediately. If there are factions within the collective capable of such biotechnology, first things first, Sarah interrupted gently, we need to save your patient. The good news is that because the parasite is artificial, it has weaknesses that natural parasites don't have. The bad news is that removing it will require some unconventional methods. She knelt beside the Vorthak again, running her hand along its massive flank. The creature's breathing had stabilized during her examination, and its bioluminescent stripes were flickering, with slightly more intensity than before. Traditional antiparasitic treatments won't work because the organism is integrated into the neural tissue, Sarah explained. But there's another approach. On Earth, we've discovered that certain parasitic infections can be countered by introducing competing organisms that target the same neural pathways. Dr. Yilneth's compound eyes widened. You wish to introduce another infection into an already compromised system? The risk is minimal compared to certain death, Sarah finished. The competing organism I have in mind is actually beneficial. It's a symbiotic neural enhancement bacteria that occurs naturally in Earth's big cats. It improves memory consolidation and strengthens neural pathway connections. She opened her medical kit and withdrew a small biocontainment unit. I isolated a sample from a particularly healthy lion population in Kenya. The bacteria has been modified to be compatible with non-Earth feline neurochemistry. Kithara moved closer, her curiosity overcoming her caution. You came prepared with a treatment before even examining the patient? Sarah smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both humble and confident. I studied every piece of data your people transmitted to Earth Station Beta. The symptoms were familiar, even if the cause wasn't. I brought several potential treatments, including this one. She prepared a neural injection system, calibrating it according to the Vorthak's brain structure. The symbiotic bacteria will establish itself in the same neural pathways currently occupied by the parasite. As it spreads, it will literally crowd out the artificial organism while repairing the damaged neural connections. And if you are wrong? Dr. Yilneth asked quietly. Sarah met his compound gaze steadily. Then your patient dies a few hours sooner than predicted. But if I'm right, the Vorthak will not only survive, it will be stronger than before the infection. She positioned the injection device against the base of the creature's skull, where the spinal column met the brain stem. The Vorthak remained completely still, as if it understood that this moment would determine its fate. The treatment will take approximately 6 hours to show initial effects, Sarah explained as she triggered the injection. The bacteria needs time to establish colonies in the neural tissue before it can begin displacing the parasite. The injection completed with a soft, pneumatic hiss. For several seconds, nothing changed. Then the Vorthak's golden eyes blinked slowly, and it released a long, shuddering breath that seemed to carry weeks of accumulated tension. Now we wait, Sarah said, settling into a chair beside the creature, and hope that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective ones. Dr. Yilneth began monitoring the Vorthak's vital signs, while Kithara paced the medical bay, her forearms moving in constant, anxious patterns. The young human, meanwhile, had placed one hand on the creature's massive paw and seemed to be whispering something in what sounded like Earth's English language. What is she saying? Kithara asked quietly. Dr. Yilneth paused in his monitoring to listen. I believe she is singing, a vocal pattern designed to provide comfort through rhythmic repetition. The ambassador watched in amazement as the Vorthak's breathing synchronized with Sarah's quiet lullaby, its bioluminescent stripes beginning to pulse in harmony with the human's heartbeat. It was a sight that challenged everything the Zephyrian collective believed about interspecies interaction and the nature of healing itself. 3 hours into the treatment, the first signs of change became visible. The Vorthak's bioluminescent stripes, which had been flickering weakly like dying embers, began to pulse with increasing intensity. More importantly, the creature's neural scan readings showed patterns that Dr. Yilneth had never seen in their extensive medical databases. The parasitic activity is decreasing, he reported, his antennae twitching with excitement. Neural pathway regeneration has increased by 23%, and the inflammatory responses in the hippocampus equivalent are subsiding. Sarah nodded without taking her eyes off the Vorthak, her hand still resting gently on its massive paw. The symbiotic bacteria is establishing itself faster than I hoped. Vorthak neural tissue seems particularly receptive to the enhancement process. Ambassador Kithara paused in her pacing to study the readouts. Dr. Chen, the neural activity patterns you have induced, they are unlike anything in our medical literature. What exactly is happening inside the creature's brain? Healing, Sarah replied simply. But more than that. The symbiotic bacteria doesn't just repair damaged neural pathways, it optimizes them. Memory consolidation improves, sensory processing becomes more efficient, and cognitive flexibility increases. On Earth, we've observed wild cats with this bacteria displaying problem-solving abilities far beyond their species' normal range. Dr. Yilnath's compound eyes reflected his growing amazement. You are suggesting that this treatment will not merely cure the Vorthak, but enhance its natural capabilities? That's the theory. And if I'm right, it means the Vorthak species might have evolutionary potential that your scientists never suspected. As if responding to their conversation, the creature stirred, raising its massive head for the first time since the treatment began. Its golden eyes were noticeably brighter, more alert, and they tracked movement around the medical bay with renewed awareness. Sarah slowly withdrew her hand and stood, moving to face the Vorthak directly. "Hello, beautiful. How are you feeling?" The response was immediate and startling. The Vorthak made a low, complex vocalization. Not quite a roar, not quite a purr, but something that carried distinct tonal variations. To Sarah's trained ear, it sounded almost like an attempt at communication. "Did it just—" Cathara began, her forearms gesturing in surprise. "Try to talk to me? I think so." Sarah moved closer to the creature, speaking in the same calm, conversational tone she had used during the entire treatment. "You understand more than anyone realized, don't you?" The Vorthak's response was to lift one massive paw and gently touch Sarah's arm, a gesture of acknowledgement that sent shockwaves through both Zephyrian. Observers, Dr. Yilnath's readings became more excited. Neural activity in the language processing centers has increased by 40%. Dr. Chen, I believe your treatment has activated dormant cognitive abilities. Sarah knelt beside the Vorthak again, but this time the dynamic felt different. Instead of a doctor tending to a patient, it seemed more like two intelligent beings meeting as equals. "The parasitic infection wasn't just making you sick," she said to the creature. "It was suppressing your natural development." But now, the Vorthak's head tilted slightly, a gesture of attention and curiosity that was unmistakably deliberate. It made another complex vocalization, this one longer and more nuanced than the first. "It's trying to communicate," Sarah said with growing excitement. "The symbiotic bacteria has enhanced the neural pathways responsible for language comprehension. Given time, this individual might actually develop speech capabilities." Cathara approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity overcoming her diplomatic caution. Vorthak have always been considered highly intelligent but pre-sapient. If your treatment has triggered sapient-level cognitive development, then everything you thought you knew about this species needs to be reconsidered, Sarah finished. The Vorthak weren't just apex predators. They were a developing sapient species whose evolution was interrupted by artificial interference. The implications were staggering. A species on the verge of sapience, reduced to scattered specimens through environmental catastrophe and biological warfare, now showing signs of accelerated cognitive development through human intervention. Dr. Yilnath began running additional neural scans, his excitement evident in the rapid clicking of his mandibles. "Dr. Chen, the cognitive enhancement appears to be continuing. At this rate of development, the specimen could achieve language comprehension within rotations, not cycles." Sarah stood and moved to the medical bay's communication console. "I need to contact Earth Station Beta. We're going to need linguistic specialists, cognitive development experts, and a lot more of the symbiotic bacteria." "Wait," Cathara said, her tone suddenly urgent. "Dr. Chen, you must understand the political implications of what you have accomplished. If the Hegemon Council learns that humans have succeeded where our best scientists failed, and that your treatment has enhanced the Vorthak beyond its natural state." Sarah turned to face the ambassador, her expression serious but determined. "Ambassador, with respect, the political implications are secondary to the ethical ones. You handed me a dying, intelligent being and asked me to save its life. I did that. But now we're looking at something bigger, the possible restoration of an entire sapient species." She gestured toward the Vorthak, which was now sitting upright and watching their conversation with obvious interest. "That creature isn't just a specimen anymore. It's a person, a unique individual with developing language capabilities and enhanced cognitive abilities. The question isn't what this means for your political structure. It's what we're going to do to help its species survive and thrive." The Vorthak made another vocalization, this one directed specifically at Sarah. The sound had structure, rhythm, and emotional content that clearly conveyed gratitude and recognition. "It's thanking you," Dr. Yilnith said in amazement, his neural scanners detecting the specific brain patterns associated with gratitude expressions. The creature is expressing complex emotional concepts through vocalization. Kethara's forearms moved in rapid, agitated patterns as she processed the implications. "Dr. Chen, you have created a situation that will require complete revision of our species classification protocols. Our medical procedures, our treatment of captured specimens." "Good," Sarah said firmly. "Maybe it's time for those revisions." She approached the Vorthak again, and this time the creature extended one massive paw toward her. Not in simple acknowledgement, but in what was clearly an attempt at a handshake. Sarah grasped the paw gently, marveling at the intelligence and awareness in those golden eyes. "What's your name?" she asked the creature, knowing it couldn't answer yet, but somehow feeling that the question needed to be asked. The Vorthak's response was another complex vocalization, followed by something that made all three observers step back in shock. The creature touched its chest with one paw, then pointed at Sarah, then made a specific sound that it repeated 3 times. "It's trying to name itself," Dr. Yilnith breathed, "and I believe it's attempting to name you as well." Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes as she realized what she was witnessing. Not just the recovery of a dying animal, but the birth of a new kind of consciousness, a bridge between human understanding and alien intelligence, mediated by symbiotic bacteria and the simple act of compassionate care. "Hello," she whispered to the Vorthak. "I'm Sarah, and I think you and I are going to change everything." 12 hours after the treatment, the medical bay had been transformed into something resembling a first contact scenario. The Vorthak, now apparently called Kethvara, stood and approached Kethara directly, moving with careful, deliberate steps that showed respect for personal space boundaries. When it reached the ambassador, it lowered its massive head in what was unmistakably a bow. Kethara's forearms moved in patterns of amazement. "It comprehends social protocols. Dr. Chen, how is this possible? The neural enhancement cannot account for such rapid acquisition of complex cultural concepts." Sarah watched the interaction with growing understanding. "It's not just learning, it's remembering. The symbiotic bacteria isn't just enhancing current cognitive function, it's unlocking suppressed memories and capabilities. I think the Vorthak species was much closer to full sapience than anyone realized." Kethvara turned back to Sarah and began a series of vocalizations that had clear structure and grammar. While the specific words were unintelligible, the meaning was somehow accessible through tone, gesture, and context. "It's trying to tell us something about its people," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder, "about what happened to them." The creature moved to the medical bay's viewing portal and gazed out at the stars, its bioluminescent stripes pulsing in patterns that seemed to correspond to its emotional state. When it turned back to them, its golden eyes held an unmistakable sadness. Kethvara approached Sarah's diagnostic equipment and began manipulating the controls with surprising dexterity. After several minutes of careful adjustment, it had managed to call up a star chart showing the local sector of space. With one massive claw, it pointed to a specific system. Nethys Prime, Dr. Yilnith identified. It recognizes its homeworld. But Kethvara wasn't finished. It manipulated the controls further, calling up historical data about cosmic radiation patterns in the region. Its movements became more agitated as it highlighted specific temporal markers, then turned to Sarah with what could only be described as an accusatory expression. "The radiation storm that destroyed Nethys Prime," Sarah said slowly, understanding dawning in her voice. "It wasn't natural, was it?" Kethvara's response was a complex series of vocalizations accompanied by gestures toward the star chart, then toward Kethara, then toward images of other Zephyrian vessels in the database. Dr. Yilnith's compound eyes widened as he processed the implications. "It's claiming that the cosmic radiation storm was artificially generated, that the collective was responsible for destroying its homeworld." The silence that followed was deafening. Kethara's forearms had frozen in mid-gesture, her entire body rigid with shock. "That is impossible. The collective would never—" But Kethvara was already accessing more data, its enhanced cognitive abilities allowing it to navigate the ship's systems with increasing skill. It pulled up records of Zephyrian military operations, biological warfare projects, and experimental weapons testing. How does it know to look for this information? Kethara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah moved to stand beside Kethara, her hand resting on the creature's flank in a gesture of support. Because it was there. It witnessed whatever happened to Nethys Prime. The memories were suppressed by the parasitic infection, but the neural enhancement is bringing them back. Kethara turned to Sarah and began what was clearly a narrative, a story told through increasingly sophisticated vocalizations, gestures, and manipulation of the ship's data systems. It showed them orbital bombardment patterns, radiation weapon deployment strategies, and biological warfare protocols. The picture that emerged was horrifying. Nethys Prime hadn't been destroyed by natural cosmic forces. It had been the testing ground for a new type of planetary sterilization weapon. The Vorthak hadn't been evacuated as survivors of a natural disaster. They had been collected as experimental subjects for biological weapons research. The parasitic infection, Dr. Yelneth said, his voice hollow with realization, it wasn't meant to kill them. It was designed to make them controllable weapons for use against other species. Kethara's response was a vocalization that clearly conveyed agreement and anger. It called up more data, showing Sarah and the others the extent of the biological weapons program. Dozens of species from dozens of worlds, all subjected to various forms of parasitic control and neural modification. My ancestors, Kethara whispered, her translation matrix barely functional as emotional distress interfered with her speech patterns. What have we become? Sarah felt a surge of protectiveness toward both Kethara and the morally devastated ambassador. You're not responsible for the actions of previous generations, she said firmly, but you are responsible for what happens next. Kethara approached Kethara and made a series of gentle sounds that somehow conveyed comfort and forgiveness. The massive predator, enhanced beyond its natural capabilities and armed with recovered memories of genocide, was offering consolation to a representative of the species that had destroyed its world. It doesn't blame you personally, Sarah translated, though she wasn't sure how she could understand the creature's meaning so clearly, but it wants justice. Not revenge, justice. The Vorthak turned to the communication console and began inputting commands with increasing confidence. Within minutes, it had accessed the ship's long-range transmission systems and was preparing to broadcast on multiple frequencies. What is it doing? Kethara asked. Sarah watched the data streams flowing across the console, recognizing communication protocols and linguistic pattern analysis routines. I think it's trying to contact other survivors. If there are other Vorthak specimens scattered across Zephyrian research facilities, Kethara wants to reach them. The first response came within minutes, a weak signal from a research station 3 systems away. Then another, from a military installation in the core worlds. Within an hour, they had identified 17 separate locations where Vorthak specimens were being held. Kethara turned to Sarah and Kethara, its expression determined and purposeful. The vocalizations it made were clearly a proposal, a plan of action that required cooperation between species. It wants to save them, Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. All of them. And it wants our help to do it. Dr. Yelneth looked between the enhanced Vorthak and the 2 females who had somehow formed an unlikely alliance. Dr. Chen, what you have accomplished here goes far beyond medical treatment. You have awakened something that will reshape our understanding of consciousness, intelligence, and interspecies cooperation. Sarah smiled, her hand still resting on Kethara's flank. I just treated a sick cat. Everything else is just the logical consequence of giving a sentient being the respect and care it deserves. Kethara's bioluminescent stripes pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as determination. The creature had evolved from patient to person to political actor in less than 24 hours, and it was clear that this was only the beginning of a much larger story. Vorthak, now moving with fluid grace that spoke of complete neural recovery, had arranged several objects from around the room into what could only be described as patterns. Not random arrangements, but deliberate constructions that suggested complex thought processes. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, facing the magnificent creature as it worked. Each object placement was accompanied by a specific vocalization, and she had begun to detect recurring sound patterns that corresponded to different types of items. Metal objects produced one set of sounds, organic materials another, Energy sources a third. It's creating a classification system, she explained to Dr. Yilnath, who was frantically recording every interaction, not just random play, actual taxonomic organization. Look at the groupings. The Vorthak had separated medical instruments from environmental controls, then further subdivided each category into smaller groups based on function, material composition, and energy requirements. When it encountered an object that didn't fit existing categories, it would hold it up to Sarah and make an interrogative sound that clearly meant, "What is this?" Ambassador Kethara watched from the medical bay's entrance, her political instincts warring with scientific fascination. Dr. Chen, the communication specialists from Earth Station Beta have arrived. They are requesting immediate access to document this development. Not yet, Sarah said without taking her eyes off the Vorthak. Right now, we're in a critical learning phase. Too many new people might overwhelm the cognitive development process. Let me establish basic communication protocols first. The Vorthak looked up at the sound of voices, its golden eyes tracking between Sarah and Kethara. It made a sound that Sarah had learned indicated attention, then gestured toward the ambassador and produced a questioning vocalization. "It wants to know who she is," Sarah translated, "and I think it's asking about hierarchical relationships." She pointed to herself and said Sarah clearly, then pointed to Kethara and said, "Kethara." The Vorthak listened intently, then pointed to itself and made a complex sound that had clearly been modified from its earlier attempts at self-naming. "Kethvara," it said, the vocalization unmistakably deliberate. Sarah's eyes widened. It's not just naming itself. It's creating a name that incorporates Kethara's name structure. It recognizes her as important and wants a name that shows connection to her. The rescue operation began 48 hours later, but it was unlike any military action in Galactic Federation history. Instead of ships bristling with weapons, the small fleet that departed from Zephyrian space consisted of medical vessels, communication specialists, and diplomatic envoys from 6 different species. At the center of it all was Kethvara, now wearing a specially designed communication harness that allowed real-time translation of its rapidly expanding vocabulary. The Vorthak had progressed from basic word recognition to complex sentence construction in just 2 days. Its enhanced neural pathways processing language acquisition at speeds that defied every model of cognitive development. Sarah stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, watching the stars streak past as they approached their first target, a remote research station where 3 Vorthak specimens were reportedly being held. Beside her, Ambassador Kethara reviewed diplomatic protocols while Kethvara studied tactical displays with the focused intensity of a born strategist. "The station commander has agreed to allow our medical team aboard," Kethara reported. "However, he insists that the specimens are critical to ongoing research and cannot be removed without authorization." From the Hegemon Council, Kethvara's response came through the translation harness in a voice that had become increasingly sophisticated over the past 2 days. "Research means torture. Authorization means delay. Delay means death." The directness of the statement sent ripples of unease through the bridge crew. In just 72 hours, the Vorthak had not only recovered from near-fatal neural degradation, but had developed communication skills, strategic thinking, and a political awareness that challenged every assumption about its species. "There's another way," Sarah suggested, reviewing the station's medical records on her portable display. "The facility has an outbreak of Rigelian fever among the research staff. They need medical assistance, and we happen to have the galaxy's most effective xenobiological treatment protocols." She looked up at Kethvara, whose golden eyes reflected understanding and approval. "We go in as humanitarian aid workers. Once we're inside, we can assess the condition of the Vorthak specimens and provide immediate medical intervention if needed." Dr. Yilnath, who had insisted on joining the rescue mission, clicked his mandibles in appreciation. "Dr. Chen, your species' capacity for creative problem-solving continues to astound me. A medical intervention disguised as a medical intervention." Kethvara made a sound that the translation harness rendered as laughter, a development that had shocked everyone the first time it occurred. "Humans think like predators," it said. "Indirect approach to direct objective. Very efficient." The space station grew larger in the viewports as their ship approached. its crystalline structure reflecting the light of the local star in patterns that spoke of Zephyrian architectural preferences. Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest as she prepared for what lay ahead. Each rescue would be different. Each Vorthak specimen would require individual assessment and treatment. Remember, she addressed the team as they prepared to dock, we don't know what condition these individuals will be in. The parasitic infections may have progressed differently in each case. Some may be comatose, others might be aggressive. Follow my lead. Maintain calm demeanor and above all treat them as persons, not specimens. The docking procedure completed with mechanical precision, and Sarah found herself walking through another alien corridor, her medical kit once again slung over her shoulder. But this time she wasn't alone. Kethavara moved beside her, its massive frame somehow managing to appear both powerful and reassuring. The research station's medical officer, a tall Zephyrian with nervous energy radiating from his forearms, met them at the airlock. Dr. Chen, we are grateful for your assistance with the fever outbreak. However, I must emphasize that our other research must not be disrupted. Of course, Sarah replied smoothly. We're here to help with the medical emergency. Though I should mention that my colleague here has some expertise with Vorthak physiology that might be useful for your research. The medical officer's compound eyes focused on Kethavara with obvious surprise. Your colleague is a Vorthak. That is, highly irregular. Kethavara is a consulting specialist, Sarah explained, using the creature's chosen name deliberately. Fully cognitive with enhanced neural capabilities. I believe you'll find its insights valuable. The walk to the medical bay took them past the research laboratories, and Sarah could see Kethavara's bioluminescent stripes darkening with anger as they glimpsed the conditions inside. Sterile white chambers, isolation units, and monitoring equipment that turned living beings into data points. Where are they? Kethavara asked, its translation harness conveying barely controlled emotion. The medical officer paused, clearly uncomfortable with the direct question from a subject species. The Vorthak specimens are housed in the xenobiology section, but they are not part of the fever outbreak situation. Nevertheless, I'd like to examine them, Sarah said casually. Comparative physiology might help us understand why the fever affects some species differently than others. It was a thin excuse, but medical curiosity was something the Zephyrian could understand. After several minutes of hesitation, he agreed to take them to the xenobiology section after they had addressed the immediate medical emergency. The fever treatment took 2 hours, during which Sarah demonstrated human medical techniques while Kethavara observed everything with intense focus. The Vorthak's presence seemed to unnerve the research staff, but its obvious intelligence and communication abilities gradually shifted their perception from specimen to person. Finally, they were escorted to the xenobiology section. The moment they entered the corridor leading to the containment areas, Kethavara's entire demeanor changed. Its bioluminescent stripes began pulsing in rapid, complex patterns, and it released a series of vocalizations that bypassed the translation harness entirely. The response was immediate. From 3 separate containment units came answering calls, weak, desperate sounds that spoke of isolation, pain, and fading hope. They're still alive, Sarah whispered, her medical scanner already in her hands. All 3 of them. Kethavara approached the first containment unit and pressed its massive paws against the transparent barrier. Inside, a Vorthak smaller than Kethavara but still magnificent lay motionless, its bioluminescent stripes barely visible. The creature's eyes opened at Kethavara's approach, and for a moment, hope flickered in their golden depths. This one is young, Kethavara said through the translation harness, its voice heavy with emotion, barely past adolescence when captured. The infection has progressed further because developing neural systems are more vulnerable. Sarah was already running neural scans, her equipment painting a grim picture of parasitic damage and psychological trauma. The good news is that younger neural systems are also more adaptable. The symbiotic bacteria treatment should be even more effective in restoring function. The medical officer watched nervously as Sarah prepared her injection system. Dr. Chen, I cannot authorize treatment without proper authorization protocols. These specimens are valuable research subjects. Kethavara turned to face the Zephyrian, and for the first time since its recovery, the full predatory power of its species was visible in its stance and expression. Valuable research subjects, it repeated, each word carefully enunciated. Is that what you call us? The medical officer stepped back involuntarily. The terminology is standard scientific. The terminology is wrong, Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying quiet authority. These are individuals of a sapient species being held against their will and subjected to harmful experimentation. In human law, that's called kidnapping and torture. She looked directly at the medical officer. Now you can authorize immediate medical treatment for these individuals, or you can explain to Ambassador Cathara why you prevented the rescue of tortured sapients when you had the power to help them. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Within minutes, Sarah was administering the symbiotic bacteria treatment to all 3 Vorthak, while Cathara maintained a constant stream of comforting vocalizations that seemed to calm the patients and strengthen their will to survive. As the treatments took effect, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning. 17 research facilities, dozens of Vorthak individuals, each one a person with memories, experiences, and the right to freedom and dignity. Cathara, she said quietly as they watched the first patient's bioluminescent stripes begin to brighten, I think we're going to need a bigger ship. The enhanced Vorthak's response carried both determination and gratitude. Humans understand pack behavior. This is good. Pack rescues pack. No one left behind. It was, Sarah reflected, a very human philosophy expressed by a very alien mind. And somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the galaxy. 6 months after the first rescue, the Vorthak sanctuary ship drifted in the neutral zone between Zephyrian and Federation space, its bioadaptive hull gleaming with integrated living systems that represented the finest collaboration between human engineering and Zephyrian biotechnology. Inside its vast chambers, 43 rescued Vorthak individuals lived, learned, and slowly rebuilt their shattered civilization. Sarah walked through the central habitat, marveling at how much had changed since that first desperate medical intervention. The Vorthak had proven to be not just intelligent but brilliantly adaptive. With their enhanced neural capabilities, they had developed their own written language within weeks, established social structures within months, and were now contributing to the technological advancement of their rescuers. Dr. Sarah, came a familiar voice through one of the ship's communication nodes. Cathara had progressed far beyond the simple translation harness, now interfacing directly with the ship's systems through a neural link that allowed instantaneous communication. The Council is ready for your presentation. The Council was perhaps the most unusual governing body in galactic history. 12 Vorthak individuals, 5 humans, 3 Zephyrians, and representatives from 4 other species who had joined the rescue efforts. Together, they were attempting to navigate the complex political and ethical implications of what had become known as the Vorthak Liberation. Sarah entered the council chamber to find the assembled representatives engaged in heated discussion. At the center of the debate was the question that had dominated galactic politics for months: what to do about the Zephyrian collective's systematic abuse of captured species. The evidence is overwhelming, stated Commander Torres, the human military liaison, who had joined the rescue fleet after the 3rd successful liberation. We have documented proof of biological warfare, forced experimentation, and planetary destruction. The Galactic Federation cannot ignore these crimes. Ambassador Cathara, who had requested reassignment to the sanctuary ship rather than return to collective space, gestured with all 4 arms in a display of complex emotions. The current leadership was not responsible for the historical crimes. Prosecuting the entire collective for the actions of previous administrations would punish billions of innocent individuals. Cathara's response came through the ship's communication system with the measured tone that had made it the unofficial spokesman for its species. Justice is not punishment. Justice is prevention. How do we ensure this never happens to others? Sarah took her seat at the circular table, noting how naturally the various species had learned to accommodate each other's different physical and communication needs. The Vorthak enhancement had sparked a revolution in interspecies cooperation, as their unique perspective bridges gaps between different forms of consciousness. The investigation results are conclusive, Sarah began, activating a holographic display that showed the full scope of their discoveries. We've rescued Vorthak individuals from 17 facilities across collective space. We've also discovered evidence of similar programs affecting 8 other species, some dating back centuries. The hologram shifted to show neural scan comparisons between treated and untreated individuals. The symbiotic bacteria treatment has been successful in every case, but the psychological trauma runs deep. Some individuals may never fully recover from years of isolation and experimentation. Dr. Yilnith, who had become the lead researcher on Vorthak neural enhancement, added his analysis. However, the cognitive improvements have exceeded all projections. Enhanced Vorthak individuals demonstrate problem-solving abilities that rival or exceed any known sapient species. Their pattern recognition capabilities, in particular, have led to breakthrough advances in several scientific fields. Which brings us to the larger question, said Representative Valdris from the Andromedan Trade Federation. The Vorthak are no longer the same species they were before enhancement. They represent something new, a hybrid of natural evolution and artificial improvement. What are the implications for galactic society? Kethavara's response carried both pride and humility. We are what we choose to become. Enhancement gave us opportunity, not destiny. We choose cooperation, not domination. We choose protection, not predation. The discussion continued for hours, touching on everything from immigration policies to technology sharing agreements. The Vorthak had expressed no interest in reclaiming their destroyed homeworld, preferring instead to integrate into the broader galactic community as teachers, researchers, and mediators between species. Finally, Sarah stood to address the central issue. 6 months ago, I was asked to treat a dying alien predator. That simple medical intervention has led to the exposure of systemic atrocities, the rescue of dozens of sentient beings, and the emergence of a new form of consciousness that's revolutionizing our understanding of intelligence and cooperation. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of humans, the compound gaze of Zephyrians, and the golden stare of Vorthak individuals. But the most important lesson isn't about neural enhancement or biological warfare or political reform. It's about recognizing the fundamental dignity of consciousness, regardless of what form it takes. Kethavara's presence filled the chamber's communication system. Dr. Sarah gave us more than medical treatment. She gave us recognition as persons. This is the gift we offer to Galaxy. Recognition that consciousness has many forms, but all deserve respect. Ambassador Kethara spoke quietly, her 4 arms moving in patterns of deep contemplation. The collective has agreed to full transparency regarding historical biological programs and immediate cessation of all involuntary experimentation. We accept oversight from the Joint Council and commit to participating in the consciousness protection protocols being developed here. Commander Torres nodded approvingly. The Federation has approved permanent sanctuary status for this ship and authorization to continue rescue operations for other affected species. We're also implementing new first contact protocols based on Vorthak recommendations for consciousness assessment. As the formal meeting concluded, Sarah found herself standing with Kethavara in the ship's observation deck, watching the stars through the transparent aluminum viewports. The enhanced Vorthak had grown even more magnificent over the months of recovery, its bioluminescent stripes now pulsing with complex patterns that corresponded to its emotional and intellectual states. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked quietly. The enhancement, the responsibilities, the way your entire species has been changed? Kethavara's response was immediate and certain. Enhancement revealed what we always were, not what we became. The capacity for growth, for cooperation, for wisdom, these were always present. You simply helped us remember. The Vorthak turned to look at Sarah, its golden eyes reflecting both ancient predatory wisdom and newly awakened sapient consciousness. The question is not whether we regret change. The question is how we use change to help others grow. Through the viewports, they could see other ships, rescue vessels, research platforms, and diplomatic transports that had gathered around the sanctuary ship. Representatives from dozens of species came to study the Vorthak enhancement, to learn from their unique perspective, and to participate in the new model of interspecies cooperation they had pioneered. You know, Sarah said with a smile, when I decided to become a veterinarian, I thought I'd spend my life treating house cats and dogs. I never imagined I'd end up performing neurosurgery on alien predators or accidentally starting a galactic consciousness revolution. Kethavara's response carried the warm harmonics that had become its version of laughter. Universe has sense of humor. Small human with big heart saves dying cat. Accidentally changes galaxy. Very appropriate. As they watched, Another ship approached, this one carrying a new group of rescued individuals from a recently discovered facility. Each rescue brought new challenges, new personalities, and new perspectives to their growing community. "Ready for the next case, Dr. Sarah?" Kethavara asked. Sarah picked up her medical kit, the same battered bag she had carried onto that first Zephyrian ship 6 months ago. Inside were tools for treating parasitic infections, symbiotic bacteria cultures, and neural enhancement protocols that had become the standard for consciousness restoration across a dozen species. "Always," she replied. "After all, every patient deserves the chance to remember who they really are." Together, the human veterinarian and the enhanced alien predator walked toward the docking bay, ready to offer hope and healing to beings they had never met but already considered family. Behind them, the lights of 43 other Vorthak individuals pulsed in harmonious patterns, a visual song of gratitude, determination, and the promise that no conscious being would ever again face suffering alone. The galaxy had become a larger, stranger, and infinitely more compassionate place, and it had all started with one simple principle. Every life, regardless of its form, deserved care, respect, and the chance to reach its full potential. In the end, that was the most human thing of all.